Hey y'all, it's Christy from Teadoddles. I'm here for another sewing tutorial of sorts. This is going to be talking about quilting on your sewing machine. I'm going to actually be sewing. I'm going to give you some hints and tips for doing that. I first would like to say welcome new subscribers, welcome back subscribers. I'm happy to have you here with me and my maker shenanigans. I do like to do the sewing things, the yarny things, and the DIY things, so you'll see a little bit of all of that on this channel. If you like to make things, you might like it here. Sorry about the earthquake, y'all. I bumped my little camera stand. So I've had some questions when I did the last video about keeping your seams straight, about how to make a proper quilt sandwich, and about how to, if you can quilt on a standard sewing machine. Yes, you can quilt on a standard sewing machine. I've done it before, but I haven't had any issues. Now, I will say that if your machine, my machine is a little, it's a strong and tough, so it's got a little bit more power than your standard machine. But I've had a standard brother machine before, and I've quilted mini quilts on it, actually, big and small. I could do quilt my bags. Now, for my bags, this is an example of a bag that I have, and it doesn't have a back on it, okay? So when I do this, because it's so small, usually the static cling of it holds it together. So I don't use pins on this, okay? When I quilt it, I just put it down on my batting and I smooth it out. Now the batting that I use, which is my favorite for quilting, is a 80-20 cotton polyester blend. The little bit of polyester gives it some better structure. It doesn't come back apart as easy as 100% cotton. And if you're looking at your, okay, so this fabric is on here backwards, as a matter of fact. Let's see. Most of your batting, I don't know if you're gonna be able to see that here. There's a side that's really smooth and soft, and then there's a side that feels a little lumpy, and it has a texture to it. The side with a texture to it is what you really want your fabric to be on. And I've got it backwards because that keeps bearding from happening on the front of your quilt, which is, you can probably see that there, which is where just over time, the little fibers come up through the fabric, okay? That's something that can happen anyway, but that side has a sizing, a texture on it that helps, it helps prevent it. It's not going to stop it all the way. So, I don't always pay attention to that when I do my bags. You can tell. So when I do something small like this, even if it had a backing on it, now if I had to add a backing, if I had to do top layer, batting, bottom layer, I'd put pins in this, okay? And I don't use straight pins because those can poke you when you're quilting, and it doesn't feel good. I'm sure many of you have been poked by a straight pin. I use these safety pins, these larger safety pins. I don't think the lighting over here is very good at all, but maybe y'all can see that. These are larger safety pins. You can see compared to my hand. Not that you know how big my hand is. But these are you can get them, well, a lot of places that sell quilt supplies have basting pins, and they have them in different kinds. But these basic big ones you can get pretty cheap. I'll put a link down to some below. These are the ones that I use when I have to have a backing on it, okay? So the first thing I do is I lay the back of my fabric, face it, well, my backing I'll lay down with the back side facing up. Obviously, you want the front side on the back of your quilt. And then I smooth it out. Usually it's best if you have a big open table, or like a dining room table, or if you've got a big open piece of floor you can do it on. I have a big drafting table in here I like to do that on because it's easier than me being on the floor trying to do that. I smooth that out, I lay my batting on, then I smooth it out again. Then I put my quilt top on, and I get everything straight out, and I smooth it out again. And then I start from the middle and go out with the pins, okay? I start pinning from the middle to go out. And usually I try to place pins no more than 3 inches apart. Okay, that's a lot of pins, but that's going to give you better results when you're trying to quilt, especially on a standard machine. I also have an extension table for this. A lot of machines come with them now. I don't know where my extension table is. I was just looking for it to show y'all, and I can't find it. So it's gotten moved somewhere when I was moving things around, and I need to find it. But it just extends the surface of this. It attaches, they'll slide right on here, and they just extend the surface, okay? But it's still usually not big enough to hold the whole quilt. So when I do quilting, I take my machine off of here, and I put it on my drafting table. If you have a big dining room table, that's a good place for it, because you don't want the weight of the quilt falling too much, because it's going to pull on your needle and your thread, and it's going to cause you issues. So you want a big surface you can have it so that it can support the weight of the quilt depending on how big it is. Okay. And I've done everything from, I've done up to a king size quilt on a standard machine. Okay. Once you get everything pinned and everything, what I do is I take the quilt from one end, because I'm going to quilt from the middle out as well. That just helps everything spread out towards the edge, right? When you start on one side and come down, you can do that, but it's going to push everything down eventually. That's just the way it works when you're sewing. It just stretches the fabric. Even as careful as you are, even as much as you try to hold it together, it's going to move some. And if you start from the center and go out, even if you're just doing a line across the quilt, it pushes it more evenly. So I'll roll up one end of the quilt, and I'll do whatever I'm doing here, and then I'll unroll it. And so the roll goes here. That's what all this is for. The roll of the quilt. And if you have a really big one, you're gonna have to roll it pretty tight to fit it in there, right? And so then I can go across the quilt if I'm doing a straight line, or I can go back and forth, however I'm gonna do it. One of my stitches, well, I'll talk about stitches in a minute. So once I finish that, then I take it off. I go reset everything, and then I bring it back to the machine. It is time consuming to do it that way, but that's how you get the best results when you have a smaller machine like this. And this batting that I use is a thinner batting, but it just makes a denser quilt. It's nice and toasty still. If you're using that fluffy polyester, that's going to be I don't find that a good thing to be quilting with. That's more like for a comforter or something like that. I don't use that for quilts. And as you go, you can take pins out, right? You're going to just watch pins as they come through and stuff. So you can take them out when they're in the way. And these are pretty easy to flip back and forth so you can keep them in a little longer. And then on your machine, up here on my machine, this is where I select stitches. I have this thing that attaches to the back of the machine. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. This lighting is horrible over here. I got to get something better. Maybe y'all can see that. It's got all kinds of stitches. If you're using straight stitches, you can set it to here, you can set it to the center, and then I take this right here, this number, this is the stitch length. I'll bump it up to 3.5 at least. And it depending on, like if I'm using fleece on the back or something, sometimes I'll go up to 4. Okay? I make my stitch length longer. That makes it get through everything faster and easier. It gives you a nice stitch definition. And then sometimes when I'm quilting, I'm so sorry about hitting that. I gotta set this better over here. Okay, there we go. I like to use this one right here, this little squiggly one, because I can adjust it way out, and then I can it gives a little squiggle, and I like the way that looks. I've used some of these other ones occasionally. The one I haven't really used, I'm bouncing y'all all around, is this one right here. Focus. Oh, y'all can see that number 17. It's a quilting stitch. It does a little squiggly stitch that looks like free motion quilting, but I don't really like it, so you can use it if you like. That's personal preference. Those are the ones I usually use when I'm quilting. Now, I do a lot of what they would consider free motion quilting, but I don't always use free motion foot to do it. Just depends on what I'm doing. Like, for example, this, I have done a couple of bags. This is my last one in this color. with where I stitch around the edge of stuff, and I stitch around flowers, and I kind of follow the lines of this, but you have to go back and forth a lot on it, and I have to turn the machine a lot. I don't use the free motion stitching when I do that because I'm trying to follow lines, and when you do free motion stitching or quilting, you actually drop your feed dogs down, and you would use a foot that looks like this. If everybody can see that, I really got to get a better setup over here. Use a foot that looks like this, okay? This is called a free motion quilting foot. It has a little spring right here. It has a clear spot right here. Okay, and so when you drop the feed dogs down, you can move the quilt in any direction. You just have to learn how to do it at a speed that your stitches kind of look the same, because it's gonna look weird until you get used to it. It's gonna give you big long stitches and stuff. So one thing you can do to help with that, I have a modified one that I use. I got this tip from other quilters. Goodness gracious, where's that shadow even coming from? Okay, this one I have a rubber band at the top. I'm trying to get this to focus on this. Not on. I have a rubber band at the top to push that spring down, and I've clipped out this little part right here. That way I can just see the needle better. I just prefer it that way. What this does is it pushes this flatter against your fabric. So it gives you a little more control over what you're doing when you do this, because your feed dogs are down. So I have done some things in the past. I'll link a video. I did one on the video where I did all my different season trees, and I did free motion quilting on it. That's what I use this for. Okay, it's usually when I'm doing more art type projects. Another thing you can use if you don't want to do all the pins, they have spray basting. The only thing is that it takes a lot to get it to stick, and it's kind of expensive, okay? I just prefer not to do that, because it takes so much of it, and then it does work. I've used it before. It can gum up your machine if you're not careful, if you put too much on it. So that's why I prefer to use the pins. Now, let's see, what else was I going to talk about? I think that's it. Another tip I would say, if you're quilting and you're new to quilting, if you're new to making your quilt sandwich and doing the actual quilting of a quilt, not the piecing of a quilt, maybe slow down your machine on that too. That can help with that. Help you follow those lines. A lot of times when I do quilting, I just go along the edge of the seam of something, if it's a simple squares and stuff like that. I don't typically do anything too fancy when I'm quilting, because I want it to go a little faster if I'm making stuff for the shop. I like to do something interesting like I did with these, and I have some other bags that I did some more intricate quilting on. But you can definitely quilt on a standard machine. Let's see, I've got this over here that I did. This is a little mini quilt. I like to do mini quilts because I can practice my stitching, and I have some hanging on my wall in my living room that are really intricate. I did all of this stitching here with my machine. I did all of the zigzags around the edge with my machine. There is quilting, if y'all can see this. Y'all, this is a terrible lighting. I did all that on my machine. I hand stitched the Busy Bee, but all this I did on my machine. And then I just sewed a crocheted border I made to the edge. So, and I've had this machine maybe a year or two, year and a half or two. So I do know, I have used a regular. I had a brother before this, which was like the Project Runaway one, and it's a smaller machine. And I've done quilts on it. I've done t-shirt quilts on it. I've done all kinds of quilts on it. So yes, you can stitch on a standard sewing machine. If anybody needs any more information about making a quilt sandwich, or if you want me to do a video where I just show you how I put a quilt together, I will put that together. I just wanted to do this one right quick to answer some questions people had about that. Like I said, if you have any questions, just let me know down below, or you can always just shoot me an email. I hope y'all found this useful, and I will see y'all in the next video.